Introducing this year's most sought-after rookie, the M&T Bank Jets debit card. This superstar is sure to be charging through checkout lines all season long.
Hey Jets fans, you got to get your hands on the M&T Jets debit card. Rush into any M&T Bank branch today or learn more by clicking the banner. M&T Bank, the official community bank of your New York Jets. Offers subject to change and certain restrictions, conditions, and fees may apply. Member FDIC.
Welcome to Stranger Things with Jay, Jack, and Mike. My name is Jay.
My name is Mike.
And I'm Steve Bye-Bye Balboni.
And welcome to the show. How's it going, gentlemen?
All right, Jack. 2 for 2. You need to explain to me what that means.
I knew you guys wouldn't get that one. There used to be a guy for the Royals and Yankees who was Steve Balboni, and he had home runs, long home runs. So they go, Steve Bye-Bye Balboni. Or it was because he was going back and forth between the minor leagues and major leagues. I don't really remember, but when Steve is wheeling that bat, he spins it around.
See, I would have gone with, and again, this is my very, very limited knowledge of the baseball world, but you could have gone with like a Jose Bautista bat flip, because I feel like that's what Steve is doing a little bit.
He did have a little bit of the twirl of the bat there.
It's more like a Tito Fuentes, well before your time, but
I know Tito Puente. The Latin artist.
Tito Fuentes. He used to bounce the bat on the butt end of the bat on the home plate and then spin it around and catch it.
Well, with that, we do have the redemption of Steve. I think in these last 2 episodes.
Yes, the top story out of these last 2 episodes is really Steve. Steve is the crowning hero. All hail the conquering Steve.
Did Steve have like beef jerky on the side of his face? What did he take that bad of a beating?
Do you remember the beating that he got?
I just was like, I don't know.
He wasn't letting up. He just
at least his friend brought him a can of Coke.
I mean, what I never understand when it comes to these types of fights that happen in TV and film is that maybe I'm just a weak-willed individual in every sense of the phrase, but if I got my ass beat like that, I would be laid out. I would not be trolloping along with my friends, doing anything, let alone, when he gets called into the moment, he'll decide to really act up and, as we said, become the true hero that Stranger Things needs. But at the same time, like, I would have gone like straight home and just put an ice pack on my face and say, "That's all right. I'll call it a day there. I don't want to go outside anymore."
That's why you're not in TV, because you can take a pounding in the face like that, like 100 punches. But if you get hit in the back of the neck or the back, you're automatically knocked out.
Is that
have you ever seen that? Have you ever seen every TV show where they hit you in the back of the head?
Oh,
you're automatically knocked
you get
out.
knocked out. You're right.
You get knocked out, but Steve gets punched in the face, 100 times?
Close to it.
In all fairness, not only did he get soda, he also got, it looks like, some Tylenol. So maybe that was the magic elixir there.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
For Steve, that let him get right back into the game.
Hopefully that wasn't the Tylenol killer. I mean, that could have been scary, too, for Steve.
Well, we have the final 2 chapters of Season 1, only a few days before Season 2 drops this Friday, the 27th. The second season of Stranger Things drops, and the reviews so far, the reviews are starting to trickle in, and the reviews are very, 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 very positive for the sequel to Stranger Things, which is unique about this show is that the Duffer Brothers are dubbing this second season sequel. So it's Stranger Things 2. It's not the second season of Stranger Things. It's Stranger Things 2. So no better discussion to have right now than wrapping up Season 1, as well as we have watched both trailers for the sequel to Stranger Things, and we'll be discussing those at the end.
Not all of this.
Jack, you had what?
I watched one of them.
Oh, my God.
I don't.
We've been recording a day later. You're such a slacker.
3 minutes? You could have taken 3 minutes out of your packed day, Jack, to watch a YouTube trailer?
I had to I had work. I was busy. I had to sing Daniel Tiger all day. No, I don't like to watch the trailers that much.
Yeah, you had one job to do. Well, anyways, Mike and I will talk about both trailers.
Yes. What I will say about, I am generally in agreement with you, Jack, about trailers, especially for movies. And because I feel like there's become this, and not to go on too much of a tangent because we have a lot of amazing content to talk about, but I feel like there's sort of been this epidemic in cinematic trailers of almost giving away too much of how the movie is going to go, I guess, to try to like really hook people into going, so much so that it kind of spoils the way that the movie is going to function. I feel like that happens less so in TV, just because you have a much longer ratio in terms of number of hours compared to the amount that's being shown on the trailer, that, you know, they're not showing you too much because there's so much content, or else you'd have to make like a 30-minute trailer in order to really encapsulate everything. So while I do see why you would do that for, I don't know, and no offense to, you know, Owen and Brews Barbecue here on the Jane Jack Network, but I can understand why you're like, I'm not going to watch the Star Wars trailer until the movie comes out. I think you should watch both Stranger Things trailers, just because you're going to watch, like 6 minutes of clips out of a combined 8 hours of total
9 hours.
TV
it's
time.
9 episodes this
it's
season.
9.
Yeah,
an extra one.
Well, you got to take away the opening theme. So is it really 9 hours?
Excuses. You're like the kid that didn't turn in his homework. It's like, well, really, I just don't believe in homework. That's why I didn't do it. Mike and I will be talking about those, and Jack can just do his best to try and keep up. We have, and we're also going to be recapping these 2 episodes and digging into those. We have a lot to do, so let's just jump into it. Gentlemen, are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I did watch both these episodes.
Wow, Jack, I'm proud of you. First up is Chapter 7, The Bathtub. Lucas warns Mike via walkie-talkie that the government agents are en route. Mike, Dustin, and Eleven flee the house. 11 telekinetically flips a van that blocks their path, and the kids escape. Lucas reconciles with Mike and 11. Joyce and Hopper are called to the police station because of Jonathan's assault. Jonathan and Nancy reveal their knowledge of the Munster to Joyce and Hopper. The group contacts Mike and his friends, and they rendezvous. They ask Eleven to search for Will and Barb, but her earlier feats have left her too weak to find them. To amplify Eleven's powers, they break into the middle school and build a sensory deprivation tank. Eleven finds Barb's corpse with a slug-like creature crawling out of her mouth. With Joyce's help, she finds Will alive, hiding in the upside-down Castle Byers, his backyard fort. Hopper and Joyce break into Hawkins' lab, but are apprehended by security guards. Nancy and Jonathan resolve to kill the monster and steal their hunting gear back from the police station. In the upside down, the monster breaks into the fort, where Will is hiding. So let's jump into the top moments from this episode. We got to start with the van flip. When I watched the Chapter 6 and it ends, I was like, I got to just watch the beginning of the bathtub because it's just one of my favorite moments. It's so E.T., but it was just such an awesome action opening to this chapter. What do you guys think about it?
I mean, this has to be the most expensive thing they probably did in this season, right? I would say, you know, outside of the CGI stuff, this stuff remained relatively low budget, so much so that the Upside Down is supposed to be constructed as the exact same set, but shaded differently. But, I mean, this was an incredible, just, as you said, an action piece, especially just the badass aspect of it all and the representation of the fact that here comes this big bad man van barreling down the street, and 11 just stops everything cold with her mind. But you have to imagine it cost them a pretty penny in order to get this done, but totally worth it.
Well, I mean, how much would one of those old Econoline vans cost? I mean, really, maybe they're saving some money by, you know, using these old 80 vans that are just laying around in warehouses somewhere.
I had a couple questions though. When the van flips over and lands on the hood, I mean the roof of the car, nobody seems to rush in and help the guys inside the van. Am I right?
Well, in all fairness, Dr. Brenner feels like, if you've seen so far in this season, he doesn't care too much about his employees.
And I hate to pick on the mom again, and I hate the whole family, the dad, and all that stuff. But okay, Mike comes running in and says, "Okay, hey, if anybody asks, I've left the country. I'm all this different stuff." These vans are squealing outside her driveway. Doesn't seem to faze her. She finally goes downstairs into the basement and goes, "Oh, blonde hair." I mean, is this mom just clueless? Is the whole family clueless?
But let's not harp on the family. Let's enjoy and savor this heroic moment for 11.
I think you have to harp on that.
Because it's just such a cool scene. Like, it's so big and grandiose and super powery. And then it goes right into Lucas and Mike and 11 making up, which is kind of the team getting back together. It's a really cool action piece. Bad parenting notwithstanding here. But
well, how often does she do laundry? I think the washer and dryer are down there. Anyway.
I think it's just one of those things where if you dig too far into that, it might ruin the show for you, Jack. But I don't know. That's just me.
Well, that's why I won't watch the
trailers.
The trailers.
Whatever.
Oh yeah, no, Jack. The second trailer. Oh my God, it goes so much. It's all about the mom's perspective. It just follows her throughout her day. They do a little like Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead-esque type of thing where we follow her time through the events of Stranger Things season 1. Can't miss. I swear. You just gotta watch it now.
I gotta stop recording and go watch it.
So we have that. Any other big ET fans here? Definitely smacked of ET, just in terms of the government organization following them. In the original, it's the adults are following with guns. In this case, they're following with guns.
No, walkie-talkies, Jay. Walkie-talkies.
That's the retcon version. That's the retcon.
Now, would it have been a too much if they had flown over the vans?
I was gonna say this is the much more violent version of that from ET.
But it even had kind of similar, just the way that Spielberg shot it, where it's like it gets like a closer shot of E.T. and Elliot, where it's kind of similar to 11, where it's just kind of like closer shot. So it's a cool homage.
Even though they're
and a
flying,
really
they're still pedaling their bikes. So
yes. But anyways, awesome scene. And then we have Lucas, Mike, and 11 making up. I know this really weighed heavy on you, Mike, so this must have been nice to see. Yeah,
I don't want to see these people fight. I mean, we're going to have my much bigger hallelujah moments coming up very soon in the episode, but I was very happy that struggle lasted, like an episode and a half, which, again, just speaks to the very clipped but exciting nature that these episodes provide.
And then after that, with Joyce and Hopper connecting with Jonathan and Nancy and them revealing their knowledge, we finally have the moment that Mike's been waiting for, the teams merge.
Thank good. I mean, the Survivor fan in me is always waiting for a merge, and it finally happened. It's been a long pre-merge, but I'm satisfied with it.
So, I mean, did it... Because I know it's something you've been talking about, the theme of the season so far from your perspective. Was it satisfying in terms of how they all came together in this episode? It didn't last long, but...
I was going to say in this episode, because I think you were just about to say, because then we begin episode 8, which I absolutely adored, by the way. But then it's like, oh, here are the teenagers again. Oh, the adults go this way. Oh, the kids go this way. So it was nice to get this little taste of this sort of like Avengers or Justice League type of thing, where it's, oh, these people are finally working together. But I think the main takeaway I have from these last 2 episodes, especially, is that looking at these really makes you sort of look back on the journey we got to this point with much more of like a warmer gaze upon it, if you will, just because, again, we spent a lot of time with everyone apart, but then you get this moment where Jonathan and Nancy, show the pictures to Hopper and Joyce, and it makes sense why they would click, because they've been out searching and they've found out their own stuff about, the Terry Ives of it all. So it makes sense that all the pieces are sort of clicking together. You can't really poke many holes in this idea of like, okay, yeah, we'll build a sensory deprivation tank, because everyone has sort of explored on their own for 6 episodes. They sort of have gathered their own pieces of information. Now they're finally colluding to put those pieces of information together to really form this puzzle of a grand plan. So, I mean, I was happy about it on so many levels in terms of both concept and execution.
Well, yeah, and you see that just moments like Nancy and Mike reconnecting, or they're kind of talking about, each other's crushes. I know you're probably ugh for that, Mike, but I thought that was sweet. Joyce and Jonathan kind of having that moment. So, there's a lot of good stuff there as they kind of came together and put their heads together. To try and find Will and R.I.P. Barb. Next up, again, this is an episode Go ahead, Jack.
Wait, was this the episode where they said there were like 6 people? Brenner says there's 6 people missing that have been taken.
I believe that might be at the beginning of chapter 8.
Yeah, I believe
I'm
it's
sorry.
when Brenner's talking to, as Jack would put it, the negligent dumb parents.
Okay, all right. No, we'll wait for that because that's another great scene.
Again, this episode just seemed to be everything that Mike was looking for. We have Mr. Clark returning in a very funny fashion, and he doesn't shut down the curiosity door.
I mean, I love also the progression of the Dustin character. I don't know if we'll talk about it at the very end, but I loved this sort of bookend of beginning the story with when they're in the D&D situation. You know, it's the whole cast fireball, and Dustin says, no, we need to put up a protection spell. So you can tell he's kind of like a guarded, you know, very sort of shy, afraid kid. But now at this point, he's really in his element. He was telling Mike and Lucas to essentially cut the BS. He's really spinning a yarn to Mr. Clark about how, as you mentioned, you know, the curiosity door can't be closed. So you need to tell me how to build a sensory deprivation tank. Take a break from watching sci-fi movies and giving fun little pop-up video facts with your girlfriend late at night. So I think Dustin has really come to shine in the latter half of the season, and it shows again at the very end where it's no longer fireball versus cast protection. It's let's throw a fireball. Then Dustin says, "Oh yeah, we're going with the fireball." So that's such a fun, like very subtle change in character that I really enjoyed watching.
Yeah, and building the sensory deprivation tank, I just love that with the wading pool. If anybody's ever had those things. It's amazing that it is still together, but putting it out as they're trying to do, I thought there was a funny aside to those old wading pools. I don't know if they make those anymore, but that was a fun retro moment. I know you probably remember those, Jack, because we had those a lot as a kid.
Yes, I do.
So what did you have to do? Did like one person have to hold on to the size to keep the structure while you filled it up with enough water?
Yeah, you kind of had to get it just right with the amount of water in it while holding it, and eventually it would support itself. But it was just this balancing act just to get it just right. And then it would get a hole in it with like if a slight breeze came by. So
they were a blast.
So with the tank, 11 finds Will and Barb, but Barb, which we kind of all assumed, Barb is dead, unfortunately.
And Nancy goes, "Okay, I'm better."
But one thing I loved about this scene was the difference for 11 here, and she actually had kind of love and compassion from Joyce, and and just the reassurance that she was giving her, and it was a very emotional bond that I think they had throughout this, and something that 11 never had before.
Yeah, I loved, again, one of the other reasons why I loved everyone coming together is because, I don't know if you guys noticed, but when they started enacting the plan to build the sensory deprivation tank, there was a lot of new pairings. Yeah. So, you know, you get Mike and Nancy, as you talked about before, talking about their crushes. You get Hopper and Jonathan, which is sort of like the faux father-son dynamic with, you know, Jonathan saying he wants to go into the gate and Hopper saying you're not allowed to. I'm the one that's going to find Will. And then you have Joyce and 11, as you talked about before. So I like the fact that one of the other reasons why it's cool to mix and match these sort of age groups is to get these other dynamics across, because as you just mentioned, they pay off really well.
Yep, they do. They do. And just as they find Will and Barb, and Hopper and Joyce go after them, the teams split up. So I'm sorry, Mike. It was short-lived, but it was good while it lasted.
We won't talk about the trailers too much, maybe at the end, for those who don't want to be spoiled or for those who might not have seen all of the trailers. But I will say one thing is that it seems to be there's a hint towards a lot more teaming up in the next season. So one of the many reasons why I'm on board here.
Just ruined the whole second season for me.
And last bit of a jump scare here. Castle Byers is blown up. Now, Mike, are you conditioned to this point, or it scared me?
I'm never conditioned. I'm 28 years old, and I've never been conditioned. I'm never going to be conditioned unless at some point somebody decides to jump out and scare me at the same time every day of my life. I'm always going to be scared. This thing scared me. I don't like it, but I liked so much more about this. I liked everything around it.
Yeah, I seem to say this every podcast, but I go, "Oh my god, yeah, this is kind of scary too." I get okay. I was wrong. I apologize.
So, Mike, do you watch this at like noon during the day? Full daylight, windows open.
Do you watch it outside in front of with a lot of people around you?
What basically happens for me whenever I watch something scary is that I got the feeling when we were in the Upside Down and when Will senses that little thing shadowing around it, I knew something was going to happen. So whenever that happens, or whenever you're like watching a scary movie trailer and you hear silence and no music, I'll like look away. I'll try to look at something else because it's always like the sound and the sight at the same time that causes the startling. So if I eliminate one of those senses, then that helps things a tiny bit. It's a little anticipatory in that regard.
But it definitely steps up the danger for the final chapter, the final countdown. So let's jump into that now. Any final thoughts here before we do move on this chapter, the bathtub?
I did want to say, though, I was watching it at work in the dark. I turned off the lights and was watching in the dark. But I started watching. It went to episode 8, not 7. I'm like going, I got like 5 minutes in. I go, what am I missing here? I don't remember this part being. So I was all screwed up. So I had to go back and watch it. So maybe I should watch it in the light with everybody else around me.
Jack, you're watching at work. Do you also have 1,500 pounds of salt around you at any point in time?
I do.
Well, you might as well check, because who knows if somebody's trying to build a sensory deprivation tank.
Yeah,
we have all kinds of chemicals.
Also,
there,
do you if you can watch it at work, do you also have YouTube at work so that you can watch a 3-minute trailer?
I can get on YouTube. Yes.
All right, well, let's jump into chapter 8.
Once I finished the internet went out.
Oh, okay, there we go.
Oh, all right, yeah.
Next, the dog chewed the cable. It's
terrible.
Who let that dog in here? All right, Hopper gives up Eleven's location to Brenner in exchange for access to the portal.
Lando.
He and Joyce enter the Upside Down. Hopper recalls his daughter Sarah struggling to breathe before her cancer diagnosis. Nancy and Jonathan booby-trap the buyer's home, then cut their hands to attract the monster with blood. Steve arrives intending to apologize to Jonathan about their fight. The monster attacks but disappears before springing the trap. Steve gets in his car to leave, but stays when he realizes the monster is returning. The monster springs the trap but escapes back to the Upside Down. 11 and the boys hide in the middle school. Mike asks 11 to the school dance called the Snowball and kisses her. Brenner and his agents arrive to get 11 back. 11 kills most of them but collapses of exhaustion. As Brenner cradles her, the monster appears. The boys carry 11 to a classroom and hide as the monster attacks Brenner and the agents. It is unknown if Brenner survived the attack. Hopper and Joyce find the monster's nest in the Upside Down town library. Will is there unconscious with a tendril down his throat. At the middle school, the monster finds the children but is pinned and disintegrated by 11, who vanishes. Hopper and Joyce perform CPR on Will and revive him. Will is hospitalized and reunited with his mother, brother, and friends. Hopper is reluctantly picked up by a black car. 1 month later, Nancy has gotten back together with Steve and both are friends with Jonathan. Hopper leaves the other food in the box in the woods. Will coughs up a slug-like creature and has a vision of the world as the Upside Down, but he hides this from his family. All right, top moments from this episode. First is Hopper's daughter flashbacks. Bringing on the tears with Hopper's backstory here.
Yeah, well, I'm intrigued to hear what you guys think, because I know, Jay, you've watched this multiple times, and I feel like, in the time probably between this first came out and now, your fatherly duties have grown even more so. Does this, emotional stakes increase even more as the years have progressed?
Yeah, absolutely, because I think it's... and not to say you don't feel it if you don't have kids, but having a kid, it just the emotional impact is so heavy because you picture your own kid going through something like that, or losing your child would be I can only imagine it would be the most horrendous thing that any human being could experience, so you feel so much, and I think it gives so much context to Hopper's drive to save Will and to find Will.
Oh yeah.
But it's just absolutely heartbreaking, super heartbreaking, because it's a happy family, and you see how this tragedy disintegrated what was there.
What did you think about the choice to save all of these for the final episode instead of parsing them out like it seems like we did with some Jonathan and Joyce stuff early on? I mean, I loved especially the sensory callbacks where, especially when we see Hopper sees Will with this weird sort of breathing tube type of thing down his throat, and that flashes back to his own daughter. So I loved those types of moments. It really, again, calls back to this trauma. And I find it so interesting that, again, we get this big mystery as to what exactly happened to Hopper's daughter, and now it finally gets addressed. Now, there's obviously a lot more to find out about the character if his ending is any indication, but I thought it was extremely effective here, that it was all saved for the end.
I think so too, because it's kind of teased. It's there, it's there, and it just had such a payoff. And to your point, it connects so well with what he's experiencing.
Well,
in the episode.
It's there, but you kind of put it in the back burner because, Hopper lost his daughter. That's why he's driven. But then when you see this final scene, this final episode where it's flashback, you go, oh my God, that's why he's so driven. That's why he's going to do it, whatever it takes to find Will because of what's happening. I think waiting to the end made it even better.
Yeah, I think it gave him stakes, and some might argue that it's too late to give him stakes, but I feel like it was right there, especially when you get this CPR scene, which
yeah.
I'm not an EMT. I don't know if pounding on his chest with your bare fists is necessarily a good form of CPR. I mean, it worked.
That's the Jack Shepherd.
It worked in
Lost.
Worked in law. Yeah,
I was gonna say
Lost,
it was very much the same thing as when Jack found Charlie being hung on the tree, and it was a very similar thing where he was flashing back to losing his own patient, and that emotional aspect kind of comes out through a physical form of aggression. Both times it ends up working. I don't know if necessarily should inspire people to do that in their real life, but I think both times it really creates a huge emotional impact.
Because when you crack his ribs and stuff like
that.
Well,
in normal CPR, if you're doing it right, you probably would crack their ribs. Just the FYI there. But
I haven't seen the poster that has the picture of someone punching a guy in the
not
stomach.
Punching, but just even
work.
Even the normal pumping, you would usually. I mean, not all the time, but it's not uncommon to break the ribs there.
Mm-hmm.
I know, Mike. You don't like the scary scenes. I don't like the scenes where things are where they're pulling things out of someone's mouth, and
interesting.
That grosses me out.
But I think it's and again, being a parent, and from both perspectives, you have Hopper who lost his kid, and then you have Joyce, who that is her son, that his life is on the line, and just the emotions that she's going through. I just think it ties so well. So I really liked holding the flashbacks to this episode. It adds so much weight. And so much emotion to the final episode.
Was it this episode that they were right where they Steve and Nancy and
yeah.
they were by the house. They're in the same area, and the next thing we see is Hopper and Joyce walking down. They're away from the house.
Yeah, I think it's just a cut scene.
Okay,
yeah,
all right.
But that was an interesting thing too, because we finally got to figure out how that whole light thing worked.
Yes.
It seemed to be like, when you're in the area and you interact with the environment, the lights on the other side light up. Now, no idea if that works the other way around, but we got to see when Hopper and Joyce were walking through the house and Jonathan saw the Christmas lights light up that he was able to surmise that was his mother.
Right. Yeah, which was cool. It was a neat scene. Which does lead to the next time I'm here. Nancy, Jonathan, and Steve try to take out the Demogorgon. Again, a really cool, satisfying peek here to the teenager storyline.
So, I mean, I know you made fun of the fact, Jack, that Nancy, sobbed about Barb and then moved on, but I would actually say that this whole thing was spurred on by Barb. I would say that this really pushed Nancy to say okay, this thing killed my best friend. Now I've got to kill it. And it just shows how stone cold badass that she got. And this is one of those things.
I bet you Barb's mom and Barb are real happy about that.
Yep, Barb's mom especially, because it's all about the moms here in Stranger Things.
Because Bob's mom's like, okay, Nancy, you redeemed yourself. Okay, my daughter's gone. My daughter's dead, but
I don't know, when Nancy pulls into Barb's mom's house with a sawed-off shotgun,
and the head of the Demogorgon.
Yeah.
This is for Barb.
What I will say about this is I loved all this. Obviously, I like the Steve redemption thing as much as we might poke fun at it. I did enjoy the fact that, as we mentioned before, he is sort of a flawed character, but we can at least see some of his motives as opposed to more two-dimensional characters like Tommy and Carol, who he shrugs off earlier. And there's obviously some badass Home Alone stuff here. My question is, in the grand plan, was this necessary? Do we think that the Demogorgon would have gone to the school anyway if it wasn't scared off by the trap in the buyer's house?
Well, I think you kind of needed something to lead Hopper and Joyce to his nest. So injuring him in some way to give the trail of blood is kind of what helped. So if we're talking about purpose to the story, I think that's where it comes in. while also giving kind of an apex to the teenagers' storyline, and letting them take out some aggression on this animal. For Nancy, you give Steve's kind of redemption and rise to herodom with his spiked baseball bat. And it was very Home Alone.
Jonathan gets a new camera out of the deal, so everybody's happy. When it was set on fire, why did they put it out?
No, I think they were trying to put out the fire.
Yeah,
in the house.
Fire.
Yeah, not burned. I mean, the interesting thing about the Demogorgon as well is that I guess it turns out that like human weapons and even natural elements like fire couldn't kill it. I guess. Again, I sort of came up with a theory about halfway through the season that it was sort of like the yin and yang of 11 and the Demogorgon, where one could defeat the other. Neither can live while the other survives. To bring up Harry Potter. And I guess that's the case here because nothing fazed that creature. As you said, it got like slightly injured, but if it was any sort of normal person, that thing would have been dead 3 times over.
So the kids that are normally pretty smart, they hear all the gunfire going off, and it's nothing stopping this thing. So they thought rocks would work.
In all fairness, so it was hobbled by the time it got to the kids. It wasn't like full force because it couldn't move that fast once it got in there. So it was. Slowed down by 1,000 bullets and being put on fire and having his leg caught in a bear trap. So it slowed it down a little bit.
So the rocks could have done it.
But I think it for that moment. And I'll save it for when we talk about that moment. Let's go to the next thing here. 11 and Mike kiss. They want to go the snowball together. Mike, was this a big groan and ugh on your side? Since you have since the start of this season, you're like, I don't want them to be shipped here.
I mean, I think it shows my own character growth in that I've actually come around to be okay with it. And this is sort of what happened with me is that, admittedly, for a while, this is weird to say, but I did not regard 11 as a child. And maybe it's because of all the ET comparisons, but I sort of regarded her as some sort of like extraterrestrial or super normal being. So then this idea of sort of, having a crush on this normal 11-year-old kid never really played to me. But it was once we started finding out that she was a human child, I sort of gave into it. And I'll admit this scene sort of got me by the end, where it wasn't really like a puppy dog crush as much as it was like kind of legitimate feelings as you could have when you're 11 years old. And again, I feel like any other 2 kid actors would not be able to pull this off, but Finn Wolfhard and Millie Bobby Brown just are so good, among all the other great actors in this, but they really pulled off stuff that could, in a very different setting, come off as very hokey.
Jack, what are your thoughts?
I thought it worked, so I'm 100% in agreement with Mike on this one.
Well, and it added just to the stakes, or just the true heartbreak of kind of the end of 11's journey in this season. Just because as she's laying there and she says like, we're going to the dance, you promise, and it's just it makes it that much more heartbreaking that
especially when she's gone and then Mike starts to cry.
Yeah, it's getting me a little misty right now thinking about it. So let's move on to the next top moment here. Dr. Brenner and team all die. Is Brenner dead when the monster comes in and attacks?
I hope so. I mean,
okay,
nothing
you
against
want him dead. Okay.
I mean, nothing against Matthew Modine, but we'll talk about this with the season 2 trailers. I don't really know what Brenner's purpose would be in a season 2. I feel like we got some characterization as to his motives, but we never got that much time dedicated to him, and he didn't really have that much depth, in my opinion, outside of being generic bad guy, that I feel like I need to see more of him. So I don't know if that's too much, if that's, a very contested opinion, but I feel like the character has had his purpose. 11 has moved on. I think we can move on from him as a character, though I have a strange suspicion that he'll be back.
That's fair, and we'll talk about it with the trailers just when we're talking about season 2 or our thoughts about what season 2 could be. But it's one of those things where they didn't show him die necessarily. So it's kind of, if you don't see him dead, you have to assume he could still be alive.
Yes.
Could he have been wounded or something?
It's the Siler thing, right? He's going to slip away and he's going to go road tripping with twins and across South America or something.
How does this always come back to Heroes?
It's always Heroes is an example of how a fantastic show can go completely belly up, and I'm glad to hear that season 2 of Stranger Things has not gone belly up, but that's what I always go to in terms of like how to take a fantastic piece of gold and then turn it to crap. It's the opposite of alchemy, essentially.
It like so quickly too. Like it was like flipping a switch.
Well, it was before even season 2 happened, though.
Yeah, the pinnacle of season 1. The whole final battle was so boring. But anyway, we're not here to talk about Heroes. We're here to talk about a good show. Next up, we talked about it earlier with the Demogorgon just getting, shot to hell. All these things happen. It goes into the room where the kids are, the D&D crew, and they take on the Demogorgon. This is such a even though it is just a wrist rocket with rocks, it's such an emotionally intense scene because they're all there. They're trying to beat this evil entity that's beaten everything else, and the odds are stacked against them. But they're there together, trying to take out this monster. It does smack of it a bit, just in terms of kids taking on this supernatural bigger being than themselves, and I think it really pays off in the end for their final showdown before 11 steps in with the Demogorgon. Mike, I don't know what you thought here.
Yeah, and doesn't it have, I'm trying to remember, doesn't its climax for the kid part at least feature a slingshot as well? So there really is like even a prompt correlation there. But yeah, I think you made a great point about how this is sort of the climax of everything the kids have been working towards. It's interesting bringing back Lucas's wrist rocket, considering that from the beginning people were, he was saying we got to use this, and they were saying that's not going to work whatsoever. And it doesn't work for a while, but I love that it was guided by 11. The fact that 11 had to be there to sort of magnify everything. And of course you get this really heartbreaking moment where she ends up sacrificing herself for them, though it does bring up an interesting question about everything too.
Yeah, and so the kind of shot something happen, and then like one seems to take it, throws it against the wall, and they're kind of shocked that it worked, and then we see that it's actually 11 is up. You see, it's beyond just the nosebleeds and ear bleeding. It's her eyes are bleeding, and she's using the last of whatever she has, and pushes Mike back. What's coming.
I guess that's showing who's going to wear the pants in the family, though, right?
No, Mike.
But it's one of those just really emotional. Just the way the scene is shot. You have the slow mo and the single female voice singing, and you have 11 killing the monster.
The kid acting too. That was great. The actors were fantastic.
I mean,
speaking of bleeding from the eyes, well, I know that we don't know if Brenner's dead, but we're pretty sure that fake social services lady and all those other people are dead. Considering that, what did 11 do? Did she
I think she exploded their brains.
That's what I think, right? Because they bled from the eyes initially, but then it seemed like they all collapsed. So I would assume that she burst a bunch of blood vessels on their heads.
Yeah,
was that the most satisfying death? Was the social worker lady?
I was fine because she seemed to be the most evil.
I just said, God, kill her. Good.
Yeah, if Brenner was 2-dimensional, then she was 1-dimensional in terms of the purpose that she served.
I'm glad she's gone.
And she says goodbye, disintegrates the monster and presumably herself, and it's one of those. It's what probably very Lord of the Rings-esque, where the heroes are victorious, but it's not without a cost, and it adds that kind of weight to the fact that they've defeated this enemy. But they're walking away with some physical and mental wounds and loss of friends.
Who is the loss of friends? Are you talking about Boromir? Is that what you're talking about? The loss of friends in Lord of the Rings?
Yeah, I guess so. I'm trying to think. I guess not too many people.
Not many in Return of the. Not really many towards the end of the journey, unless you want to count Gollum, who I guess was sort of like their begrudging friend.
Spoiler alert.
Jack, it's a 14-year-old movie and a 40-plus-year-old book. I think we're outside the statute of limitations here.
I haven't seen the last one yet. I was just planning on doing it after I watched the previews.
I tried to get Jack to watch that series forever, and he did his usual old man complaining thing, and it was like, wait, the movie doesn't end after the first one? I don't want to watch anymore.
No, I said it has no conclusion. They're up on top of the thing, and I go, wait, that's it?
It's a 3-part book series.
I watched the second one.
Mm-hmm.
I did fall asleep.
Anyways,
What I do want to say before we leave here is that there is this weird. I mean, this season ender did open up a bunch of questions that I feel like we might get some answered in the second season. But there was this really interesting moment where, you know, 11 decides to sacrifice herself, and she reaches out to sort of kill the Demogorgon. And if you notice, the Demogorgon also reaches out. And you also have this moment like a couple episodes beforehand when 11 says, I am the monster. Do you think there might be some meat on the bones of this idea that like 11 and the monster, again, are sort of, as I mentioned before, like the yin and yang? They sort of like function in very, I don't know, not necessarily similar functions, but they almost exist in very similar, I don't know, statures or positions in the different universes. This is still like a very nubile theory to me, but that gesture alone just kind of made me think about it.
I don't think it's a wrong theory or a bad theory. I haven't even thought about that before, to be completely honest. But I do see it there. There is definite thematic elements to make it kind of a yin and yang kind of thing. Jack, what are your thoughts?
I like it. Go with it, Mike.
Is that like crackpot theory of the season?
Yeah, I
there
think
you go.
So.
I like it.
Let's see here. Other moments. Oh, yes. Joyce and Hopper find Will and Sam. We already kind of touched this before, but again, talk about climaxes for a season. Finding Will, the thing that was set up at the very beginning of this season is that you have the conclusion of it, very emotional, and Will is okay, but again, is different.
Is he okay?
I can't. It's the Dan Harmon circle theory. Or story circle theory, where it's basically the hero starts out, they want to change, things happen to them, and they go back and things are the same, but they're different. That's a really bad shortened version of his writing theory. But
that absolutely made no sense, but it's okay.
But in the sense that, you know, everything's back, like they're all back, but they're all after this journey that they've gone through have changed.
They'll never be the same.
Yeah. But thoughts here, like satisfying. I know for you, Mike, you thought Will would be dead, but Will is alive. Thoughts there for you?
Yeah, I'm happy about, as weird as it is to say, I'm sort of happy about this to be continued thing, because one of the things that I was fearful of is, this is a weird comparison, but it's sort of like the Hangover movies where, you know, the first Hangover movie, I don't know, Jack, if you watched past the first Hangover movie. I don't know if you thought there was...
I've actually unfortunately seen all three.
So you've seen all three Hangover movies. You haven't seen all... Okay, well, this is... All right, this is just getting my bun steamed. My potatoes are runny, just like Joyce's. But the thing about the first Hangover movie was that the thing that kind of made it work was the fact that there was these three characters looking for this fourth one. And then when you have this fourth character join, I feel like one of the many things that worked against that franchise in future installments was the fact that, okay, now what is this fourth guy going to do? You know, you sort of figured out the dynamics of the characterizations of the other three. Now the fourth is sort of like an appendage there. What I'm happy about with Will and what his, you know, what might be happening with him is that it at least makes the character interesting. You know, now it's not like, okay, here are the three guys and Will's here too, who didn't really have that much development outside of those flashbacks. I'm happy that this sort of gives us a way to get to know him a little bit more.
Is it going to be Will though? Is it Will?
Or do you think it's some sort of like Invasion of the Body Snatchers type of like a pod person Will?
Could be.
I mean, that's not a bad theory just in terms of what we've seen, but I don't think that's the case.
Not having seen the previews.
Having seen one preview.
Okay, so you got to have some kind of storyline for the next 4 years, right? They're doing 4 more seasons. Okay, they've killed the whatever. They've killed that Demogorgon. They've killed that thing. 11, we assume, is going to be back because we see the waffles at the end that Hopper left for. So we got to have something. Nancy gets another best friend that dies. I don't know. There's so much to go on, but I'm going to say that Will is not Will.
Okay.
All right, so that's your crackpot theory?
You can't have a happy ending. Yeah, I'm going to say it's my crackpot theory.
So it's not that Will has changed and has gone through things. It's actually not Will. It's an alien of some sort.
Some kind of alien. What was that? It had that thing inside him, and Hopper had to kill it. It was so he spits out the little slug at the end. So yeah, I'm saying it's not Will.
So I will define the story circle technique that Dan Harmon invented, and it's apparently used a lot in stories now. It's 8 parts. So a character is in a zone of comfort or familiarity. The second is they desire something. The third is they enter an unfamiliar situation. 4, they adapt to that situation. 5, they get which they wanted. 6, they pay a heavy price for it. 7, they return to their familiar situation. 8, they have changed as a result of the journey. So the idea is that's the framework for it's kind of a broken down version of the to the hero's journey, but it's similar type of story arc here that we've seen for a lot of the characters.
Yes, the hero's journey, but with more emotional weight, more realistic standards of not necessarily PTSD, but really feeling the context and the consequences. And yeah, like you said, we see it here where they get back and, it's Christmas and things have changed. It seems like Jonathan is good with both Nancy and Steve. There were so many emotional moments that really hit me this episode. And again, I think it really just is a great representation of the fact that we've seen so much from these characters. And we'll get to, I know that you wrote this in your notes, Jay, the Return of the King style ending when Will wakes up in the bed and everyone jumps on him and then they say in slow-mo, Aragon! And then, Viggo Mortensen comes in with the bright line and everything. But yeah, I think that especially when Will first wakes up and Jonathan and Joyce are there, I mean, that got me legitimately emotional because we have seen so much of those two characters specifically and their interactions with Will that it was so great to when he woke up, it had stakes. Yeah. It didn't just feel like another scene where, oh, he's awake, hooray, everything's okay. You really went on a journey with these two characters and really sought out how much emotional depth they had been plundering to get him back. And so to have him come to and everyone's teary-eyed and weeping over each other, I thought that was just a really nice moment in particular.
It definitely was.
I know I talked about, I was ahead of myself in this episode, but they said there was 6, Brenner said there was 6 people taken.
Yeah, so remember there was the hunters that disappeared, Barb, Will, and we saw the skulls and other bodies in there too, so it's just, I guess, other people that the Demogorgon happened to get that weren't important enough to be characters.
If only when they were mentioned, they could have won an Emmy.
They could have, possibly. So I say Return of the King style ending, one for them first coming back, and then you kind of had each scene, I think, could have been the kind of the end of the season, and then it would cut to another scene. It would keep giving us more. So you had the that, and then you had the Christmas party, and then you have Jonathan picking up, or you have the next D&D game where they decide to throw fireballs, and then Jonathan's picked up, and you kind of have the nice moment between Nancy and Steve. And then you cut to the Christmas party, and then you have him putting the Eggos in the little food box, and then it cuts, and it's like, okay, that could be a good. And then, one more scene here. Yep. We have the Christmas dinner, and then you have the, Will spitting out the slug, and then going back, and then you kind of close out the season. So for me, especially when I watched it, and it was a year ago the first time, and as we're getting now prepped for the sequel to the first season of Stranger Things, I thought it did a really good way of giving a post story to set everything up, but also giving it a satisfying conclusion to season 1.
Yeah, and then, then Sean Astin gets with Rosie the barmaid. Oh, wait, that's another Sean Astin character. We'll talk about that. I agree. I could definitely understand why there might be some criticism about the fact there's a lot of codas going on in the musical piece that is Stranger Things Episode 8. But at the same time, again, we went on this journey with these characters. I personally would like to see, the interesting thing about all these moments, too, is that it sort of did close a door, but almost left it a little cracked to say, there's still something that might be investigated in season 2. Even with the teenagers, it was, Nancy and Steve give Jonathan the camera, which is a really sweet moment, and then she kisses him on the cheek, and you think, okay, she's with Steve, it seems like things are okay, but she sort of gives this longing glance as if to say, okay, things might be a little more complicated emotionally. Obviously, we talked about Will and the slugs. We have Mike, down in the basement, longing, looking at the fort for 11. We obviously have Hopper leaving the food out there, for 11 or some sort of 11-like creature. So one thing that I liked about it is, yes, on paper the scenes might have seemed redundant, but we know so much about these characters that I wanted to see them sort of get their quote-unquote happy ending, while at the same time getting a peek into what might be coming for them down the road.
Yeah, and I think they maybe even put it in there because the show technically wasn't renewed until I think a couple weeks after it aired. Because again,
That's
Netflix, they put it all at once.
That's surprising for Netflix. Usually Netflix shows, they renew it like 2 weeks before it premieres, not after it airs.
And they said they had a feeling it was going to get renewed. They were working on it, but it officially wasn't. I think it was released middle of July, and I don't think it was officially renewed until maybe the first week of August, somewhere around there. So either way, I think final thoughts here for season 1. Fantastic season. Really satisfying conclusion. We mentioned, kind of joked on Heroes, where it didn't really have a satisfying conclusion to season 1 and then really went downhill after that. But just a really satisfying total season. The fact it's only 8 episodes, the way I described it to people is like it's kind of a long movie in a sense. Because that's how I felt watching it. I watched it, I think, over the course of 3 days. And it was just this really engaging, engrossing experience that was just a really fun story to watch that was nostalgic, but not just nostalgic for nostalgic sake. It was also a really engaging and fun story.
So the question I have for you guys, and I think both of you, considering that I'm assuming you've both watched this now, both on a binge and now stretched out over these 4 weeks, do you have a preferential experience? Because, well, I did say at the very beginning of this series of podcasts that I am not really the binging type. At the end of all of this, there's so many bookends, like I mentioned before, with Dustin and all this other stuff, that I could imagine how this series would play really, really well binged over a weekend.
Yeah, I think it does lend itself because it is so short. It's not, this was a standard like 13 episodes usually. Like, you can do it in a few days. And again, the pacing is so tight that you really, it does really lend itself just to keep watching. Like each episode just ends on a place where like, okay, I gotta see the next one. I gotta see the next one. So I think it is it's a balanced show that I think can be binged. But having spread it out we spread it out roughly over a month. That was enjoyable too. But it's hard for me to totally understand that, given that I had already seen it, so I could be more patient in watching it. It'll be interesting to see as we go into Stranger Things 2 and kind of spreading that out over 4 weeks, roughly.
Because we're going to watch an average of 2 episodes a week, right?
Yeah, and maybe so we're going to continue with this format. Yeah. So I don't know, maybe at the end of all this, if we have someone who binged through it all, if they want to weigh in on their thoughts. But yeah, I wonder, if it's going to be done in a very similar style. I know it's one more episode, as you said, but if they're preparing to make it more of like a not, I feel like there's a difference sometimes with TV shows between, especially in a binging format of, here's a 10 episode show versus here's a 10-hour movie. Like when they did the Wet Hot American Summer sequel / prequel on Netflix, that's how they essentially wanted it to be billed as, is like a 4-hour movie. Yeah. It seemed like Stranger Things kind of wants to go in that same direction.
Yeah, definitely for season 1.
I think it's kind of like, because, I look at like a show like, was that show with James Franco, November 26th?
Heroes.
Yeah.
11/22/63,
where I only got 1 episode a week. I'd be like, I gotta wait a week. But here, when I'm binging, is sometimes I go, I hate rushing through it. I hate going too fast because you mess up. Like, okay, I gotta see the next one. Gotta see the next one. Gotta see the next. Because when you watch it again and again, you say, I missed that part. I didn't catch that part. I didn't see that part. That's the problem when you binge something, is you're just in such a hurry to get to the next episode. It's not all sinking in.
Yeah, I will say there was, and this is a third time watching it. There was moments that I did miss the other 2 times that I did, and to really fully engage in the story. The most that I did was in the third time watching it, where I did space it out.
So I think there's a plus and minus. Like I said, I want to binge, but then I like to make it last. So it's like, okay, I'll wait a couple days on that final episode to watch it or something like that.
I will say, though, that in interviews for this, for Stranger Things 2, the Duffer Brothers have said it is a slower build. So maybe the pacing will be a little different.
Well, the previews, they definitely say, if you watch the previews, it says that.
Yeah, the second one really, it just says it's going to be a slow build. That's really interesting. I'm going to be really intrigued to see the general reception to season 2, just because I think Heroes is one, but I think many times in recent years we have seen this example of something that really explodes in the pop culture zeitgeist in the first season, and in the second season and then on just doesn't live up to the hype. I personally disagree with this, but I think we might have seen it as most recent as Mr. Robot, which is a show that everyone fell in love with the first season, but the second season is a much slower build, and I won't spoil anything about it, but there's a certain question that people keep asking the entire time that does not get revealed until basically the last half of the finale. And so I can understand why people might take some reservations with that, but it makes it easier for us to talk about it considering that we're only doing 2 episodes a week. So I can't complain that much.
And I would agree. But the reassuring thing here is the positive reviews that are coming in so far for Stranger Things 2 and the trailers. So let's jump into the trailers now. That will kind of conclude season 1 of Stranger Things. Now we're getting into talking about season 2. And so if you're a trailer phobe and you don't want to talk about them, you can stop listening now. But I do want to thank the people that make the show possible. Our patrons, Tack from Tokyo, Eckhart Richter, Molly the Millennial, and Ed the Letter Carrier. If you'd like to become a patron and give whatever you can a month, whether it's $1 on up, you get different things the more you give. Go to janejack.com and click on the Become a Patron link today. All right, so let's jump into these trailers. The first up is the Comic-Con trailer, named so because it was released at Comic-Con. They had Hall H. I was not able to go into it because I will not camp out days in advance for a panel. I'm an old timer Comic-Conner, and I will not do that. But for those that did, and for those that were outside and saw it when they dropped it a minute later on the internet, I thought the Comic-Con, aka Thriller trailer, was awesome. I love the trailer.
I'll admit I watched both of these in a row, so I think you might do a better job of sort of parsing out what's in each one. But it's so interesting also to watch these two as well, having just finished the first season, just because, again, I don't really have a sense of what became noteworthy things that happened in the season proper that really caught on in the pop culture zeitgeist. Like, apparently Steve's spiky bat is one of them, considering that it's shown, I think, in both trailers. It's mentioned a couple times. He's in the poster wielding it. I'm surprised. I had heard more about the van flip and the Eggos and everything, but I'd heard nothing about Steve's bat before I finished.
Frankly, I didn't either. So it might just be something that they feel they wanted to make a thing.
I didn't see it till the second. That's why I said it. I didn't see it till the second time I watched it.
I remember him wielding it in like a shot in the first one, but in the second one, there's like a scene of like him and Dustin, opening up his trunk, and Dustin's like, "Do you still have that badass bat?" And then Steve takes out the bat. So like, I just wasn't. I think my wife compared it to Negan from The Walking Dead. I don't want to. I think it's considered a curse word now, Jack, if I mention that show's name. But I definitely drew some comparisons there. But I had no idea if it was sort of like a big thing when the season itself premiered.
I don't think so. I really don't think so. I mean, I think it was like a cool moment and an iconic moment for Steve. So I think it's a fun callback as opposed to like this is a thing, like Eggos is a thing.
It made Steve a superhero. So.
He's Batman?
Yeah, there you go.
I will say opening up at the arcade was awesome for anybody that grew up with arcades. They're not as common now. Even though we got a good one in Raleigh, it's Boxcar Barcade, a lot of fun. But they are playing Dragon's Lair. For anybody that ever played Dragon's Lair, that was the hardest freaking game. Mm-hmm. Jack, did you ever play that in the arcades? That was around your time.
A drag? I don't remember it. No,
that was the one where it was almost like a cartoon. It was this Laserdisc game.
Yeah,
it was.
Yeah, I know about it, but I don't think I don't. What do you mean my time? I mean, I was. Was it in the set? Was it around the 70s?
No, 82. You were what, like 20?
Yeah, we did. I didn't play.
We know you were spending a lot of time in the arcade in your 20s, Jack.
Actually, in my 20s, I was playing Ghost and Goblins. That was my game of choice.
Talk about a super hard game. I also love Dragon's Lair because I feel like, not to get too like video game nerdy, but I feel like that's like the first time instance of QTEs, quick time events, where, like you said, you really had to like navigate that joystick almost immediately when you saw things flashing, or otherwise you turn into that skeleton.
Yeah. Oh, it was so hard, especially because I was like a kid, so I didn't really have any
Oh
skills.
yeah, your reflexes are not that good when you're that young.
Using some excuses. I was a kid. That's why I couldn't win.
Loved just how Thriller kind of comes into it, how it paces with the music, and I love how it's set in Halloween. It's being released right before Halloween. I love the Ghostbusters reveal.
Of course, that was a given.
And another panel I saw.
Plus, like the little like container box too that they have in Mr. Clark's trap. Back room, I think.
There's their own homemade ghost trap, which seemingly has something in it. So that'll be curious to see how that pans out. I also went to a Ghostbuster panel at Comic-Con that year, and Ivan Reitman talked about how the Duffer Brothers contacted him and Ghost Corps, which is the kind of company that owns and manages the Ghostbuster stuff run by Ivan Reitman. So they worked with Ghost Corps to actually set up the scenes and everything like that and make sure it was in canon and stuff like that. So that might be a bigger part, which is awesome as a big Ghostbusters fan. The Duffer Brothers are around my age, or at our age, Mike, and so pretty cool to see that. But just a great trailer in the sense that it didn't reveal, I don't think, a whole lot about the season, but definitely revealed moments from it and setting up and showing little glimpses of new characters. But absolutely love the Comic-Con trailer. I keep telling me it's like probably my favorite trailer of the year so far. I just loved the trailer. It was so much fun.
Yeah, though I will say I think one of the big reveals was obviously at the very end when... Again, spoiler alert, hop out now if you don't want to know anything, but you have 11 seemingly making her way back into the real world. Again, we don't know if her getting rid of the Demogorgon sort of banned her to the Upside Down. It kind of seems like it, or some other world, but she literally reaches through, so she's back, I think much to Mike's enjoyment, though who knows? I don't know who this young Sansa Stark-looking redhead girl is, but maybe there's a possible love triangle going on there.
Well, and with the Friday the 13th trailer that was just released, we kind of see other moments with 11 where she looks older and has, curly hair. So I definitely, because this Stranger Things 2 takes place a year after almost a year after the events of the first season. So the scene at the end of the Comic-Con trailer could be like an immediately after we last saw 11. And then kind of jumping to present day for some of the other moments that we saw with 11 in the Friday the 13th trailer.
Yeah, it's interesting thinking about, like you said, considering we have 11 making her way into the real world, but we also have, as you said in that second trailer, 11 has this big curly bouffant, and she's, we see her making her way to that little compartment in the woods where Hopper had left her food at the very end of the first season. So I like your theory. Maybe there's out of order stuff where we see maybe a flashback of her coming through, and in the month since everything happened, she sort of has just been hiding in the woods the entire time.
Yeah.
Sort of like keeping to herself for some reason. But she's also gone like very, very Henry David Thoreau. She seems very to herself. She's a woman of the woods.
Yes, it definitely seems she's going on her own journey.
She's Rambo.
and don't know how that will play into the other characters. We do see some new characters. You mentioned the young redhead. Apparently there's going to be a new bad guy that's a teenager bad guy, which I think is the brother of that young redhead, I believe. I'm not sure. And he's going to be pretty much one of those prototypical Stephen King evil humans. And then you have Paul Reiser, who maybe is kind of subbing in for the Brenner role, or at least representing the government-type characters. And their inspiration for this Paul Reiser character was Paul Reiser's role in Aliens. So we know how that played out. That'll be interesting to see that dynamic. And then you have Sean Astin.
Yes!
Oh, is he really in it?
Sean Astin is in it as Joyce's
Rudy.
love interest. So,
yeah, he plays like a doctor, I guess. Which I don't know. I mean, the obvious Tolkien fan in me loves seeing Sean Astin in here, if only because I hope he tells Will eventually. Like Will says, you've got to, you've got to get this worm out of me. And he says, I can't carry it for you, but I can carry you. As he goes up to the gate carrying Will.
But again, I love the inclusion of Sean Astin here because there's obviously inspiration from Goonies in this series. So having him there is awesome. Of course, Rudy, Lord of the Rings. He has played many an iconic character. So excited for him to be joining it. But it'll be curious to see because I know a lot of people have shipped Hopper and Joyce. It'll be interesting to see that dynamic with Sean Astin's character and Joyce dating. Which I think will be interesting. But any other thoughts on the trailers? We'll kind of wrap up there as we say goodbye and get ready for Stranger Things 2.
The other thing that I'll mention is that there is, and this is a lot of speculation. So again, tune out if you don't want to know too much about this. But there seems to be some sort of spider-like, spindly creature that seems to be the new sort of Demogorgon, the new big bad that will. I don't know if he's predicting it or if he sees it with his flashes to the Upside Down. We're not entirely sure, but I think it's almost foreshadowed in a way. At the very beginning of season 1, they're facing down a Demogorgon, and that's what they decide to sort of call the creature that they eventually encounter. Where they encounter at the end of season 1 a Thessal Hydra. And for those of you that are sort of into the Dungeons and Dragons lore, there's sort of this idea of the Thessal monsters, and I think actually I don't know if it's officially confirmed, but I think they might be calling this creature the Thessal Hydra, right?
I'm not sure. I have not. I've read articles. I've been trying to not read too much, so I'm not too spoiled. But it would make sense. It definitely has multiple seeming heads and arms and everything like that. So that would be. It'd be cool if they kind of kept on with that nomenclature for how they name the different beings that they're going up against. Yeah,
and it's also much, much bigger than the Demogorgon. So they might have to call in, some sort of kaiju to take it down at the end of the day. But the stakes have increased very much so for season 2, if this is any indication.
Or another 80s reference. They'll bring Voltron in to face.
Yes.
Against this being. But either way, really excited for this season and excited to see these first episodes. Colleen and I are doing a Halloween party where we'll watch the first 2 episodes, so excited for that. We will be podcasting about it on Monday, so it should be up Monday night for anybody that is watching the show. Again, we will be doing 2 episodes per podcast. Since it's kind of been recent that we found out it's 9 episodes, I don't know if we'll do 3 in the last one, or maybe we'll split it out to 2 and then 1 for the last. We'll kind of see how that plays out, but we'll tell you as it goes along. But definitely expect the first 2 chapters from Stranger Things 2. That's what we'll be talking about on our next podcast. Give us a call at 385-309-0311 or give us an email at strangerthingsjjm@gmail.com if you want to give your theories as it goes along. But again, we'll be only watching and talking about the first 2 episodes. So if you do give feedback, keep it spoiler free. All right.
Maybe what people can do is especially if you're writing in an email, put the episode you're talking about in the title of the email.
There you go.
That way, so if you say, I have a theory about episode 4 of season 2, you can send it to us right when you think about it. But that way, when we're reviewing the emails, we don't have to click into it and read through it to figure out, what you're referring to and possibly spoil ourselves for what's to come.
Boom! There you go, Mike. I like it. All right.
Good job, Mike.
That will do it for this episode. Again, we'll be back next week, just right into season 2, and it will be a lot of fun. Check out our other shows, janejack.com/iTunes. Mike, where can people find you?
At a Mike Bloom type, I do podcasts about Survivor. I just did a RuPaul's Drag Race podcast. I cover movies on the Hamster Factor. We're talking about The Babadook for Halloween. I am not excited to watch that, considering how much I hate jump scares, but I will do it. And if you want to check out other stuff in the Bloom family, my wife Angela was actually just on post-show recaps with Rob Cesternino talking about Star Trek Discovery. She is one of the biggest Trekkies I know, and it's a really fun podcast, so check that out.
Boom. Well, there you go. Awesome. All right, guys, we'll see you next time. Hasta luego, and goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.